listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ann, and welcome you to episode number 39. Today, we have the guest, Maria Palmer, who is the author of the book On the Rocks, The Primadonna Story. Now, the Primadonna Story book was so amazing that I almost read it in one sitting. In fact, I was supposed to go eat brunch with my daughter, and I kept delaying it because I was so enthralled in the book. You're going to love it as well. What's the book about? Well, On the Rocks was born out of a family history project that Maria felt had commercial appeal. The book's subject, her father, was the former owner and operator of the Primadonna Restaurant. He's a well-known personality in the restaurant world, one of the most decorated restaurateurs in the United States, winning multiple awards both locally and nationally. He hosted a radio show called Fine Dining in Pittsburgh and around the world, and wrote a weekly newspaper column in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette about food and the local restaurant scene. Costanzo owned and operated the Primadonna Restaurant in McKees Rock, Pennsylvania for 17 years. The restaurant was frequently voted the best Italian restaurant in Pittsburgh, receiving glowing acclaim in the local Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and City Paper, as well as national publications like the New York Times, New York Daily News, and Playboy. Costanzo used his marketing genius to create his own bottled Italian salad dressing that was sold in stores, and even offered a Primadonna apparel line, essentially turning supporters into walking billboards. The restaurant's recipes have been published in many cookbooks, including critically acclaimed food critic Mike Kalina's Pittsburgh Cookbook. In 2001, the Primadonna became known across the nation as one of the premier Italian restaurants, earning the prestigious Dorona Award. Not sure I pronounced that correctly, so listeners, feel free to correct me in the comments. In 2005, after a targeted public investigation, Costanzo lost his restaurant and spent time in federal prison. His life and the lives of the family members have never been the same. Oh, you definitely need to read the book to find out more. Okay, let's talk about Maria. Maria Palmer is a writer and Page Turner Award finalist. She's also a regular co-moderator for Food is Religion Club on Clubhouse, and she was a former host on LA Talk Radio. Maria was featured on Food and Beverage Magazine Live, a nationally syndicated podcast. Her writing has been published in OC87 Recovery Diaries, and she's made a number of media appearances. You can find Maria on Facebook and Instagram at Joe Costanzo Primadonna. Let's correct that. At Joe Costanzo Primadonna, and on Twitter at Maria C. Palmer. Now, a few fun facts about Maria. First off, she throws killer children birthday parties with unique themes like goats in pajamas and alpacas doing sidewalk chart art. I feel like we need to see a photo of this. She also taught her children their address by reworking the lyrics of the song 8675309. And she remembers all of her old addresses by humming this tune. She loves rescuing pit bulls who were on the to be killed list and turning them into high maintenance pooches. Okay, enough of this. Let's do it. But first, a reminder of our 3 C's of engagement. Number 1, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the notification button to make sure you do not miss future episodes. Number 2, commit to staying until the end of the episode. Oh my gosh, she gives so many words of wisdom at the end, my heart just explodes. And we also tell you how you can be registered to enter into our next giveaway. And then the 3rd C, well, of course, it's your coffee. So go fill up your coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Okay, listeners, happy Sunday. We are recording this on a Sunday afternoon, and I am very stoked to have author Maria Palmer here with me, who actually was connected to me via Sandra Rostarola, Making Friends with Monsters author, another one of my favorite books. And she wrote the book, On the Rocks. I'm going to let her talk about the book. I do want to share with you, Maria, that I almost read the whole book in one sitting. It was just that I had to go to sleep one night, and I was going back and forth, and I had to meet my daughter for breakfast, and I'm literally going texting her, can we meet just a little bit later for brunch? How about 1 o'clock? Because I was in such a great part of the book. And then I thought, okay, just put the book down, go eat with your child, and then come back and read the book. So now I'm going to pause. Maria, introduce yourself. Tell us why you're here today and just kick us off.
Oh my gosh, that is such an amazing, incredible story. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here, Ange. My name is Maria C. Palmer. I am the author of On the Rocks, the Primadonna Story, which is the narrative nonfiction story that follows my father, who was once an A-list restaurateur during the 80s through the early 2000s, and his rise to success and fame in the restaurant industry in a really corrupt, small little town called McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And most people have never heard of the city prior to last year. And then last year, the Buffalo Bills star Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field in a cardiac arrest. And he is, in fact, from McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. So if you think that name sounds a little bit familiar to you, that is why. His mother's daycare that I think he's now raised almost $9 million for, maybe a little over $9 million for, shares a back alleyway with what once was my dad's restaurant, the Primadonna. And the story kind of follows this really unlikely path to success and rise to fame in the industry. And then every story has a good hook, right? So ours ends with a stint in federal prison. And I'm kind of banking that maybe where you were whenever you had to stall your daughter's brunches, maybe in those prison chapters, because I have a funny side story that I actually have.
It was in those prison chapters.
I knew it. So I have a funny side story about this. So there's a woman who used to be a customer at the restaurant. Her son actually went to high school with me, and her son was always just a very comedic, kind of funny person. He ended up being a radio personality and still podcasts, and just a very fun guy. And I never knew where he got his humor. Well, I realized it was from his mom, because she started reading the book and she also could not stop. And she was around those chapters over the summer. And so she had a hair appointment, and she called in and said that she had an emergency. And so the hairdresser,
oh my gosh, I love this.
She knew her personally. And she said, oh my goodness, what is going on? Is your husband sick? Is there, something wrong with your family, one of your grandkids? And she goes, no, Joe just went to prison and On the Rocks, and I cannot stop. I need to reschedule the appointment.
And I hope to your dad, we made the most respect to say possible, that we're laughing about the fact that is a moment.
It is a moment. Yeah. And so she wrote an Amazon review. So you can check it out if you want to tell that I'm actually telling the truth in this story. But if you go to Amazon and look under my reviews, you'll see her review. And she talks about how she had to cancel the hair appointment. I think she also canceled lunch with some of her friends because she couldn't stop reading. She said the book is just very addictive. So that is just such a high compliment. And thank you so much for that. And yes, I'm also connected with the great Miss Sandra from Making Friends with Monsters. And that is also another book that if you have not read or you need another last minute gift, it's a YA book, but everybody should pick that up. And it's really about some very important mental health topics, very serious, but very, very well presented book. And she's really hitting it off the charts right now. So thank you for connecting me with her because she's just such an amazing author and really an amazing person too. So thanks for having me here.
And that book, And I don't know that anything's going to happen. I did submit that book behind the scenes to Oprah's book club, and I said this is on brand. I 100% agree with you. Everyone needs to read that book. People of all ages. I think it would be a phenomenal book for a literature course in college, a phenomenal book in high school for different people. And that I'm going to try and pull up and see what episode it was we talked to her, but she was amazing. So I'll remember that in a minute. And I think a thing about Sandra's book that is, first off, it talks about mental health and in a variety of ways. And it really talks about how to deal with emotions and how to put words towards emotions. And that's kind of the life lesson of that book.
Mhm.
And then in this book that you're writing, you're really sharing a life lesson of how you and your family, how your dad, who, by the way, has more grit than most people have. I mean, he has more grit in his pinky than most people have in their entire body. You know, someone who's just like, I'm not going to let anyone say no to me if I have a dream. And really a story of him persevering towards his dreams. And then also how sometimes you can work really hard for something and the situations and the environment around you can cause complications that you have to learn how to deal with, and they impact the rest of your family. And I think it's really, when I took a step back at the end, I said, wow, this is a reminder that every family, every famous person, every situation, there's always a story behind it. And you shared this story. So tell us about what made you decide, I'm going to share this story. And you shared the story in your father's voice and not in your voice. And when I was reading about it ahead of time, I thought that was really fascinating. So can you share that with the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So this story actually started as a family history project some 17 years ago. And so through our whole journey, we were really on the top of the world for such a long time. And we had celebrities that would come into the restaurant very frequently, sports stars, broadcasters, and we were winning awards both nationally and internationally whenever everything kind of took a dive for us. And once we lost everything, including my dad's beloved restaurant, who really he treated like a third child. It was always the annoying little brother that I never had. Um, I could just see that the passion and the fire inside him that he once had was kind of vacant. And he longed for that restaurant so much because that restaurant offered him an opportunity to connect with other people at a level that you really can't just connect whenever you see somebody out at the grocery store or you're watching a sporting game. It's a different level whenever you're inside of a restaurant and you really get this sneak peek into other people's lives and you celebrate their highest highs, sometimes their engagements or the announcement of the birth of their first child or grandchild. And also some of those sad moments where, people's parents may pass away, and they decide to spend the celebration of life, dinner or lunch with you. And you feel just such an honor and gratitude to be part of that journey for them. And so, whenever you're stripped from that so suddenly, there's a loss, and it's almost like a trauma in a way. And I knew that the best times in my dad's life, and still today he'll say this, were spent at the restaurant. And so I just asked him to tell me stories. So would talk, and I had this old school tape deck from, the early 90s and early 2000s whenever I was in college, where I would record my professors and I would just ask them very simple leading questions like, tell me about a time where a celebrity came in, or tell me about a time that there was a fight at the restaurant, or tell me about a time where you were expecting one thing to happen and then something totally different did. And then I would just press record and play at the same time and just let him tell his stories. And then I transcribed those stories and they just kind of became this collection of vignettes. But as a writer myself, my regular 9 to 5, I also work in the nonprofit field as a grant writer. And so I can spot good stories. And normally, good stories tug at you based upon what the content of the story and also based upon the images behind those stories. So whenever I think about people or things to feature, I'm always thinking about those two elements. And there was just so much of that in my dad's story. And I thought, I think that this is a great family history project, but I think it's much more than a family history project. I think this has a commercial element to it. But I didn't know where to take it next. And so I had always stayed connected with my co-author, Ruthie Robbins, who at the time was my AP English teacher, Ruthie Dines Robbins. And she knew I was working on this project. She, like, talk about 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. She grew up in the Rocks, which is what McKee's Rocks is known as collectively, the Rocks. So she grew up on the same street as the Primadonna. She was one of the first customers at the restaurant. She was my middle school teacher, and then she followed me through my high school years, including my AP English class and another couple of college credit courses that I took in high school under the communications realm. And I was actually friends with her oldest son. We had a lot of connections. We actually both had moved separately to Los Angeles after graduation. And so whenever she would come and visit, we would see each other and have dinner. And it was just really a lovely relationship that we kind of carried on for many, many years. And she knew that I was working on this project. And she had recently moved to Buffalo, New York, and was editing published works for people who were formerly published authors and wanting to be published authors. And she just asked if she could take some of my writing samples to this writing group and get some feedback. And so I said, sure. And so the next thing that happened is she took all of the writing samples, and they said 2 things. And the first thing I definitely knew, and that is that the book needed a lot of work. And the second thing is that they also saw a lot of commercial value and potential. And at that point, what I had done with the book, very unsuccessfully, I was kind of trying to achieve this matrixy type feel to the book, where I started as an adult from the moment that the federal government knocked on my door looking for my father. And I flashed back to 1986, whenever I was 4 years old and he was just getting in the restaurant. And then he started chronologically, which is how the book goes right now, when he opened the restaurant through the time that he got into some trouble. And it worked in my mind really well. It did not work on paper. There was one voice that was screaming through, and it was not mine. It was that of my father. And so from then on, we determined that we would write it in the first person narrative perspective as him. And that became really fun. And actually, that took a lot of the pressure off of writing, because he's a larger than life type character. Whenever you read the book, if I've done my job well, which I hope I have, you should feel like you're at the bar rail with my dad, and he's just telling you story after story after story about.
So I want to share how I felt.
Yeah,
okay,
please,
so
do it.
And because I have a special needs daughter, and so one of the things for her, she's 21, but it's really important to her that we go to the same restaurants and that people know her name. They know her order. They talk to her as a human being, not someone who's a potential tip or anything like that. So this has been something that we've instilled together since she was probably like 5 or 6. Okay. And it is such a big joy in her life. So when I was reading the book, I could just picture myself walking into one of our favorite restaurants where we sit, maybe at the end of the bar, the two of us, and whatever is we always drink is there. And then he comes out and he's just this person who seems to just exude this amount of bountiful energy and love and kindness. And almost, he literally knew everyone. So as a as a guest, it reminded me, and that's why I was so captivated. I felt as if I was at my favorite restaurant, where I had this one example of this sushi restaurant in Atlanta that was like this. Okay. And Rihanna and I used to go there for her birthday every year. And one year we went, and the waitress who always served us, she had just bought Krispy Kreme donuts, and she had them in the back. And she comes and brings a donut out to Rihanna at the and it is that, like, getting to know each other. You're building a family around a business. And
Yes.
what a joy that is. And so that's how I could just picture him. I mean, I just felt like he was someone that would just, like, come up and give you a hug and knew everything about everyone. And yet he was so obsessed with having excellence in so many different areas as well.
Yes, I think that you really hit the nail on the head. What's been really interesting for me is now that I'm on tour with this book, I'm in different cities and different places and on different podcasts and TV stations. And so many people have come up to me and said, I've been to your dad's restaurant. I know I've been there. And it's not by the look of the building or that they even necessarily remembered what they had to eat. They remember the personality that they were greeted with at the door. And if you are unsure if you've been to the restaurant, you probably have not been to the restaurant. Because if you, or, maybe my dad, on the very rare occasion, I think probably in the 17 or 18 years that he was in business, every once in a blue moon, he would just go to if he was invited to a family wedding, he would just go to the ceremony for an hour and then go back to the restaurant. So it was maybe one of those very, very, very rare occasions that he wasn't there, which he was always pretty much there. But people remembered him. And I think people love to be embraced by him. And I'll tell you kind of a touching story that I think just hits the nail on the head. I have a good friend of mine from high school, and both of his parents, he has an older sister, but she was much older. And so he was more or less kind of raised by himself, but his parents were really into food, and his mom was Italian. His dad wasn't, but his dad loved really good food too. And they would come at least once a week to the restaurant, sometimes maybe more. It was such a part of his upbringing, such a part of who his parents were. And they were just really, really nice people, but also equally very good customers. His dad had passed away about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And just recently, not this past summer, but the summer before, his mom passed away. And I happened to be in Pittsburgh. This was before the book came out. I happened to be in Pittsburgh, so I could actually go to the funeral mass. And I walked in and, attended the service. And afterwards, I went to just check in and say hello to my friend, because I wasn't going to be going on to anything else. I had other family matters that I needed to take care of. And he ended up writing me a message later in the day. And he said, the thing that I longed most for today was something that is unable to be obtained anymore. And he said, my parents had such wonderful memories at your dad's place. And now that I'm living out of town in Washington, D.C., one of the hardest things for me was to choose a place to have the celebration of life kind of wake after the funeral, because the obvious choice no longer existed. And he said, I felt like it was so wonderful that you could come, but I felt like I needed to have the Primadonna, and it was no longer there. And since then, obviously, he's read the book and really enjoyed it. And, it's kind of brought back his own memories, even though his story per se is not included in the book, but it is, because the fabric of what was, you're going to find that in your favorite sushi place in Atlanta. You're going to find that at your favorite pizza joint in New York City. You're going to find that wherever it is that you like to go, that you feel like you are a part of, because that's the key. And you said something very important. It's whenever your customers become your family. And that's what the Prima Donna did for people. And that's the type of memories that people hold. And I'm hoping that that's the type of memories that people get whenever they read the book and they reminisce about what once was. And, in a way, I'm longing that, maybe a new entrepreneur might read this and may open up a business around the same concept or model, because now there are many restaurants out there, and there surely are some that are doing a really good job at this, but most of it is very robotic now and very impersonal. And I think that the lovely dance that we once had and the commitment to hospitality has kind of gone by the wayside in a lot of ways. And I'm not sure if it's the technology or just the era that we're in or just a new generation, but it's sad. And I think people are longing for something like that.
I
So
love that. And I think it's that, it sounds cliche, but it's that white glove customer service. And it is, I talk about the finance or the software company that I built before my current company. One of my criteria is software is not known for white glove customer service. And I said, we are going to be the gold standard. And when there were times when new team members would come in and they would say, we don't need to respond to customers that quickly, or we don't need to bend over because this is the industry standard. And I would say, okay, no, wait. We are the gold standard. We are not going to lower ourselves to everyone else. If everyone else wants to compete, they will raise up to us. And the thing I love, I was thinking exactly that. I was thinking, okay, listeners, one, if you just want a really amazing story to read that has mystery, adventure, unknowns, twists and turns, and hey, a little prison at the end, then this is a great book to read.
it's true.
But if you're as you just mentioned, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to read something that reminds you to not listen to naysayers, to follow your dream, to focus on the key parts of your business, that what is success is for that business, to not let those things slide and sell out for something cheaper or something whatever that's more, in theory, economical, because it won't be economical in the long term. So if you're an entrepreneur, and maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're at a hard time in your business and it's struggling, this is a great book, because I was so inspired reading it. I was just thinking in every season, because your book walks through several seasons of the business. It walks through this is the world's worst idea, son. And when it fails, I'm not rescuing you. You're on your own, right?
Sure.
It walks through that moment to when it's just, there's the first time you're not taking reservations and after you had the big review or whatever, and there are people lined up for hours down on the street, right? To the fights. And I mean, very much different phases of life and phases of a journey. And being an entrepreneur myself, every successful company goes through those phases, but the way that they become successful is to not listen to the naysayers, not give up, continue to have that heart and passion, which he displayed that heart and passion. He loved, as you mentioned, you said this is like your sibling, your younger brother, right? He loved this. This was his baby and he loved this. And I think that's beautiful. So we don't want to, so everyone, you should absolutely go buy this and buy a copy for your friends as well. Let's talk a little bit about how was it for you? So I remember the point in the book when the police come and knock on the door and they reach you and you were young. Can you kind of walk us through maybe your mental reaction? You see your dad and he's amazing. And I know you had so much respect, and I can just see the look in your face, how much love and respect you have for him now. And yet here this sudden thing happens that would have thrown anyone off at this point. So you can kind of tell us about what that journey was like?
Yeah, sure. So I think I a couple minutes back kind of set the tone for where we were at that time. So the restaurant could not have been busier. It could not have done more well at that time. We had just gotten a Dorona Award, which is comparable to James Beard Award, but back then, now James Beard is very different, but back then James Beard was just for chefs. So now it's really opened up. So the highest gold standard for a restaurant was the Dorona Award, which was a Distinguished International Restaurants of North America Award. And we also had a Wine Spectator Award, which is a big deal too. And things just could not have been better. And I was very young. I was only 20 years old. I was a junior in college, and my parents had built their dream home, and we were really living large. Everything was going, exactly how it was planned to be. I had gotten into Syracuse, and I was in my junior year at the media school there, and making lots of friends from high places. And it was really going very well. And then I get this knock on my door, and it was the federal government asking for my dad. And actually, the first thing that went through my head was not that they were inquiring about my dad. It's that they wanted to talk to my dad about somebody that he knew. So let me kind of stage this for you, because I know as a listener, you're probably thinking, well, if they wanted to talk to him about something that he knew, he probably had to be sketchy, right? Well, whenever you whenever you work in the restaurant business, you get to know people of all shapes, sizes, creeds, colors, ethnicities, SES level, disabilities, like everybody, age factors, it doesn't matter. You know everybody. And we did know everybody. And in the 17 years that his doors were open, we have about 1 million people that walk through our doors. That's a lot of people. And that's a lot of people that we remained close to. Because remember, this is like a Cheers type of environment. Whenever you came in, you were part of our family. So if you were kind of a good egg, you were part of our family, maybe like a little teeter-tottering on some sketchy business, you were still part of our family. And then if you kind of like were listening to the wrong side of the world, you were kind of still part of our family. We really accepted everybody, and we enjoyed everybody, and we gave everybody the experience that they were seeking, whatever that may have been. We kind of met you where you were. So for somebody to be looking for my dad and to have a question about somebody else, it would not have been out of the normal at all, at all. And so that's what I had originally thought that it was. Now, it was still scary. It was still kind of a scene that I replay in my head, and almost one that you've seen in the movies where, people are flashing badges and then there's no good news that happens afterwards. So I did also think in my mind very briefly that somebody had died. That was another thought that kind of came to my head. But once I asked that question, then they said no. I felt relieved, and I felt like, okay, this is probably about somebody else. It's probably fine. And, also too, if you grow up in a mafia kind of crime family, which my family was not, and really there was a very long investigation, they were hoping to find something like that, and it clearly was not there. But if you did grow up in one of those types of families, you know that there is a potential possibility, and it's probably even more of a probability, that the people that you love are at some point going to serve some time in prison, because it's just part of that particular lifestyle. And so for us, whenever they came in, they were looking for my dad. I told them to go to the restaurant because that's where he was. I gave him a call. He was not concerned in the least bit. What started to concern me is whenever hours had gone by and I hadn't heard from him, and I was calling the restaurant phone, and at one point I think he had picked up and he just said, "They're still here," and then he hung up the phone. And I definitely got a very bad feeling in my gut after that happened. And it was kind of the beginning of this really long journey of troubling mental health for me, because all of this was so out of the blue. It caught us all very much off guard. We were not expecting it in the least bit. My dad was not expecting it. My entire family was not expecting it. Our community was not expecting it. The customers at the restaurant and the people that worked for him were also really not expecting it. And I think how it happened was also a little bit disillusioning, because his name was mentioned in a federal grand jury investigation where somebody else was asked to give the name of somebody that they thought maybe was a person of interest so that they could get the get out of jail free card in the Monopoly set. And so they gave my dad's name. And so that's how this kind of spurred into this big investigation. And, it was sad because really my dad had not been a person of interest before this at all. He'd actually been a pillar in the community and done a lot of really wonderful things for a community that really struggled and needed it. And he actually turned the economy of McKees Rocks around for the time that he was in business, hiring people from the community, especially a lot of young people who are now all incredibly successful individuals. So
and I want to interject. One would say as well that in reading the book, one of the challenges that I saw is that he did so much for the community, not to promote the restaurant. He didn't have this agenda, because if he had, and he'd been tracking it that way, things would have been very different. He did it because he loved the people. He loved the community. He saw this community as his family. So oftentimes he would be overly generous in ways. And then because he wasn't looking for the accolades and he wasn't doing it from a business mindset, then he wasn't maybe tracking it the way that he should have, that could have helped long term. And so I think that is an endearing part of him as a human being, because so many organizations and so many companies will say, okay, I'm going to support this nonprofit, but I want a plaque that shows our name on it. And now, granted, I do know he loved plaques and he did love them on the wall, but I think that was another
he did have
component.
An affinity. He did have an affinity for plaques.
And so, but so many companies do things not because they really care about the students, not because they really care about the teams, not because they really care about the community, but because it seems like a good marketing ploy. Now, granted, he did use it as marketing as any business person, but his heart was overflowing so much so that he's perhaps more generous than what I know your mom would have liked.
Yes, exactly. For a lot of people, it's about the optics, right? It's about, how do I get myself positioned to be this person or this top restaurant? For my dad, it was about the feeling that he got right here, right? He would just go over and above, and he's still this way to this day. I mean, he's retired and he's touring now for the book and just having a lot of fun. But to this day, whenever I'm home and he loves nothing more than to treat me to dinner, or, if he finds out that if I say something just off the cuff and I say, hey, I discovered that I really like XYZ drink, or I really like this snack bar, all of a sudden, next time I see him, he will have gone to Costco and bought like a gazillion of these in bulk. And I'm like, Dad, that's not why I was telling you this. I appreciate it and I appreciate your kindness, but for him, it gives back to him more whenever he can see that look of joy on people's faces. And that's whenever he would find out, little things about his customers or his customers' relatives. There's, one scene, there's a very instrumental person in the book who's one of my dad's original customers, and he always comes in by himself. He was a Vietnam vet, and his mother loved scratch off lottery tickets. So every time this guy would come in, and he was a really wonderful customer, before he left, my dad would give him an envelope with 10 or 20 scratch off lottery tickets, and he would say, "Oh, give this to your mom. This is for your mom." And the customer was always floored by it because he was never used to that type of kindness, being a Vietnam vet, living on his own, not having friends or family. And he was just always floored by that my dad wasn't doing it for anything in return. It was just his nature. And I think, even through the entire situation that we went through, and, I should mention now too, if this would have happened today, we probably wouldn't have On the Rocks, because this would have went down in a very different way. It could have likely went down civilly. whenever all of the investigation happened and it was found that my dad did owe back taxes, he did try to do an offer in compromise, but the government wouldn't have it because he was mentioned in a federal grand jury investigation, which automatically at that time put it into a criminal case and not a civil case. And also there were something under the Clinton administration called these federal mandated guidelines. And it was basically like a grid, right? You serve this crime with this severity, meet the two, and this is your sentence. And the thing about the federal government is they have a 99 point something percent conviction rate. So if you plead innocent and you're found guilty, you're actually serving a larger, much more hefty sentence. So he pled guilty. He admitted his wrongdoing. And even at his sentencing, the federal judge said to him, Mr. Costanzo, I've been to your restaurant. It's really wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And I do think that you are a very good person and a pillar of the community. I think that what you are also is a really horrible bookkeeper. And that's why we're in this situation. And like you alluded to, I mean, we're running a nonprofit and being an entrepreneur yourself and, opening up different businesses. Whenever you donate something, those are tax write-offs, but they can't become tax write-offs if you're not reporting them and recording them. And, what would happen with my dad is he would have all these gift certificates and gift cards and coupons and, salad dressings and free zucchini. And he would just he'd be passing them out as he was out and about doing things. And no thought in his mind, like maybe I should have recorded that, or maybe I should have, thought about how many of these I was passing out, or, had like a roundabout total. None of that. It just wasn't part of his makeup and who he was. And, we all have tragic flaws. And I think that maybe that was his. Sometimes I think in the beginning of the book, we have a quote, and I'm probably going to get it wrong. So you know what? The book's right here. I'm going to read it so I can get it right.
Please do. I love that.
This is my favorite quote of all times. It's in the beginning of the book. And I do not have my glasses on. So that means I do not have my reading glasses on. So this will be fun.
We'll see how long your arms are today.
This will be an adventure for all of us.
I absolutely love it.
Okay, so the quote is, "The intangibles that enabled me to achieve my greatness also contained the seeds to my destruction." And I think that that's true about all of us as human beings, right? Like there is a duality of who we are as humans. And there are these incredibly wonderful, great things about us and these accolades that we all have. And, we all want to talk about, the highest high points in our lives, right? But then there's these other parts of us that we would rather people not know about, or we try to hide, or we try to, as I would bring up Sanders' book, not make friends with, right? But these are things that kind of lurk below. And this is what happens whenever you're human. So, another important element is that this is really a humanistic story. And it really does touch on kind of all the good, but it also touches on all the hard. And, I think that both are equally important in telling a balanced story.
Without a doubt. When I was thinking about building the company and we were talking about white glove customer service and then transitioning to the things that your dad did, is that it was reminding me of a quote that was included in a book, Here Are These Truths. I just interviewed the author recently, so his episode will probably release before yours. And it's a leadership book. So the book, though, the quote is a Jack Welch quote. And it's companies don't give job security, only satisfied customers do. And so when I think about even, with the little fun, amazing, quirky things that your dad did along those things that were part of, I'm sure, what really frustrated your mom in certain instances when she's trying to balance the books. And she's like, sure. wait, you just did what ad on the Super Bowl? Like, really? And yet, he also, I mean, it is exactly that. I love that quote that you just read, because it is sometimes the things that are the greatest about us are also our biggest challenges. And it is the value of individuals or families or having someone who is in your support system that can help balance out those other parts of us. Because if your dad had been an accounting guru, I seriously doubt the restaurant would have been so successful, because he would have looked at all the numbers and said,
Right.
this doesn't make sense from a
No.
numbers perspective. It never did.
No,
But that
never
wasn't
did.
him. He was a
Right.
heart. He was passionate. That's who he was as a human being. And that was amazing. And so, he needed those other components of it, which also brought us down. So he went into prison, and I love the stories that he shared about his time in prison. And then, he was released. And I was thinking about this because I want to talk about your nonprofit that you run, Get on the Bus, and have us talk about it, because I have said in several episodes of this podcast, one of the things, actually, we talked about it in the episode that is about the book Brave 52 Weeks of Being Mindful. And it's because Dr. Constance, the author of it, part of the work he does is he goes into prisons and teaches mindfulness exercises in prisons. He also goes into a lot of other areas. But I loved the part about going into prisons, because it is my perspective that individuals who are convicted of a crime and they go to prison and they do their time, they've done their time, people, okay? And when they come out and try and integrate back into their families, back into society, we as a society do not do a good job at all at setting them up for success. And I mean, there's so many areas of research and stats, and people have compared the US versus other countries that the word's not right, but re-imprisonment rate, whatever that is.
Recidivism. Yep.
There you go. It is so off because of this. Okay. And so now tell us about your nonprofit. What was the impetus behind it? Go for it.
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about my connection with Get on the Bus. I should say that currently I do not work for Get on the Bus. I'm back in New Jersey, and I work for another nonprofit called St. Paul's Community Development Corporation, but we do somewhat similar things. St. Paul's really focuses mostly more on basic human needs. We do have a reentry program as well, and a job development program that deals with reentry population, but it's mostly food, shelter, that kind of stuff, schooling, So how I got into Get on the Bus, whenever everything was going incredibly wrong, I was just about to graduate from college, and I had this boyfriend that I thought was really special, and it turns out I was right, because now he's my husband. But he had this dream of moving to LA to start something in the film industry. So I went with him, and this was not at a great time for me. My dad had just gone to prison, and I went thinking that whenever you hop 3,000 miles away, your problems just stay where they originated, right? Look at Anne. She's like, no, that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
But
I thought that as well. I have the scars to also say that does not happen.
It's horrible. It's really great in theory. And, we should really try to, with all this AI, maybe we could come up with like some way to do that. Just like it could be here you go, entrepreneurs, all you AI and tech people. Could it be like, leave your problems at your door? I love that, and just walk away, and then you don't have to deal with anything. But unfortunately, that's not how life goes. And so I moved to LA. I was not in a very good mental state at all. Had a lot of trouble making basic decisions. I was very much, I've always been a person that struggles with anxiety and depression, more anxiety than depression. But my anxiety was just at such a heightened point because my dad's investigation was a very public one and everybody knew him in Pittsburgh. I automatically assumed that no matter where I went, if I was walking around somewhere, or if I opened my mouth, the first thing that people were going to think is there's something wrong with that girl. There's something wrong with that girl. So because of it, I really stopped. I'm a introverted extrovert, but I present very extroverted, but really in my mind and in my comfort zone, I'm more of an introvert. I'm probably the most introverted person in my family, which doesn't say much because I'm in a family of extroverts. um, but at the time, it was really hard for me to speak to anybody because I was just afraid that I came with a stamp that people knew that I was going through something heavy and that there was something wrong. And that's a really hard place in your life to be. And if anybody that's listening to this feels like that, what I would say to you is please hold on. Please talk to somebody. Nobody on the outside knows that there's anything going on with you up here. It's just up here. It's just something with you. Nobody else sees that. So get that particular piece out of your head and don't be intimidated to open up to somebody that you can trust and to have a confidant, because we are not going to get through our hardest times standing alone. We need a support system behind us that's going to help to raise us up. And for me, I was very fortunate to have my now husband, who really understood me to a level that I'm just astonished that he could at the ripe age of 21 years old. And when we got out to LA, we were searching for a church community, and he grew up an Episcopalian, and he had found this Episcopal church in Beverly Hills. And I thought, oh, there's nothing really great that happens in Beverly Hills, right? I think at the time, Winona Ryder had just shoplifted from there. I'm like, no, this is just not my bag. But there was going to be a presentation from a Catholic nun who started Get on the Bus. And I was a former Catholic and not too excited about seeing a Catholic nun. Everything that I had known about a nun was they were in habits. Sometimes they carried rulers, and if you lived in the 50s and 60s, sometimes those rulers made contact with your skin, not necessarily something that I wanted to be a part of. But at that point, I really had no other choice. My boyfriend then said to me, I really think you should go to this. I think that you could get something from this presentation. I think that you should hear this woman speak and see what she has to say. And it was one of those moments where I came in late, sat in the back, didn't talk to anybody, waited for the presentation to start. And I'm looking around the room trying to spot where this habit is, because I was like ready for Sister Act, right? Like a nun just jumping out at me. And it didn't happen. And all of a sudden, arriving on the scene is this woman who is completely fashionista, wedge heels, her toenails matched her fingernails. She's got like all these bright colors on, this beautiful jewelry. She's walking down the aisle. She knows everybody. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, okay, this woman, I'm thinking, is going to introduce this nun, because she seems like she's making her way to the front. So she finally makes her way to the front, and she introduced herself. And here she is. She's the nun. So what I was seeking was not what I was finding that day, which also tells you something in life, right? Never judge a person by what you think they might be, because they're going to throw you for a loop. And her personality also threw me for a loop. She's the closest personality to my father in a female that I've seen. Just totally like gregarious, off the chart, seemed to know everybody in the room, funny as anything. Nothing about her screamed nun. I actually thought, I'm having a hard time even believing that this woman is a nun, based upon some of the stories that she's telling. Maybe she might want to go to confession after this. But I waited till the end, and I just felt very compelled. At the time, I was not public at all with my story. I was in very much, I don't know if you would say denial about it. Maybe that was what it was at the time, but I was not really open to talking about it. And I really didn't share with people, especially people that I didn't know, about what was going on with me or my family. And I just felt compelled to go up to her afterwards and just introduce myself and just tell her a little bit about my story. And, under the auspices that, I didn't want her to save me or help me in any way. I wanted to see of what service I might be able to be to her, because the rhetoric and the stories that she was telling, basically, she started Get on the Bus out of a need. She was going to bring a delegation of Catholic women to go visit the women in the Chowchilla Women's Prison in California. And she went around the room talking to the women in prison, and the women said, it'd be really nice to get a visitor, but why wouldn't we get our own families? Why would we get these strangers? And she said, what? Like, your families aren't visiting? And she went around the room and she said, how long has it been since you saw your children? And it had been between 4 and 17 years since people had seen their children. That's a long, long time. If you're a parent, even if you're not a parent, you're somebody's child, right? Think about not seeing your loved ones for between 4 and 17 years. And so she knew that something had to change. And so she started that very day trying to get a bus together and figuring out all of the specifics of it afterwards, which just reminds me so much of my dad, the Catholic congregation.
Build it while it's running.
Exactly. She's like, what about insurance? And she goes, we're not worried about that.
We'll figure it out later.
Like, we're taking this bus. I don't care about insurance. It doesn't matter to me. We need to do this. This is the right thing to do. And so she took that first bus of 17 children and their guardians. Many of them were the parents of the women who were incarcerated, the grandparents and also grandfathers. And she took that first bus and something very magical happened. The families connected. They started to heal. They formed bonds that went off way longer than the duration of that visit. And so Get on the Bus was really born. And so I tapped into this. It's a very long story. After we had met, we had this really great connection. We exchanged cards. She lost my card. That's a whole nother story. For like 2 years, we were not in search of one. We were trying to be in search of one another, but neither of us could find one another. And then I was doing my master's degree at Pepperdine University, and I had to have a thesis for my master's degree. And so I thought, maybe if I can work with her, looking at the evaluation of her program and try to offer some good. And so I called her and she said, where have you been? I've been searching for you for like 2 years. And instantly, I think I went to her office that day. She asked me what I was doing during the weekend. And she said, will you come with me to this mega church and just talk about your story? Because I think the people in Pasadena can really relate to you, because you're not scary to them. That's like, okay, sure. Like she just totally kept it real. Right. So I went and I started speaking on behalf of the organization. She would take me everywhere. I'd go to Pasadena, I'd go to South Central. It didn't really matter to me, but we had a lot of fun and we made a lot of money for her organization. And then one day, the director of the organization just up and quit. And we were sitting at this gas station and, she just looks at me and she said, the director quit. And I said, well, what are you going to do? You have, I think this was January or February. The events were obviously taking place Mother's Day. And then at that point, we were also doing Father's Day events too in June. So I said, what are you going to do? Like, this is a really bad time for someone to quit. And she said, well, I have somebody else in mind. And I said, well, who is it? And she goes, well, it's you. Said, what? No, that's a bad plan. I'm only just barely out of college. I cannot run this statewide, decentralized grassroots organization. Like, I just can't do it. It cannot be me. It cannot be me. And she said, no, you can do it. It'll be easy. Well, that's another life lesson. Nothing in life is ever easy. Nothing. None sometimes lie. They do. What can I say?
I have to share this. So I was actually at my bishop's house last night, and I was helping his wife, who's a dear friend of mine. We were putting together Christmas ornaments to give to the members today in church. And I've just been, as we mentioned, we've postponed things. I've been super sick. And she'd asked for my help. And so I said, okay, how long is it going to take? And she texts me back 45 minutes, right? And no, of course it's not going to take 45 minutes. So we're there putting them together, and I'm suddenly realizing there's 100 of these, and it's her daughter. I mean, we have this assembly line going, and I looked at her and I said, "Did you say that lie of 45 minutes with a straight face to me?" The bishop's wife, right?
Yeah, exactly. But this is what makes people gravitate and give, right? They have to feel like it's easy and accessible. And so she did. She instilled a lot of confidence in me. I'm grateful to her to this day. She is still like moving amazing mountains. She just started another nonprofit a couple of years ago, helping families that are coming in from Mexico to acquaint in the United States, just doing like really amazing things. But that was really the start of how I tapped in to get on the bus. And whenever I took the job, I had thought that this job would enable me to help a lot of people, right? It would give me kind of that same satisfaction that my dad got at the end of the day at the restaurant, where I could reunite families and, do really great things in my life. And I thought that it would be all about me doing things for other people. And really, because I was at this place where I was trying to heal and trying to make sense of my life, what it actually was is it was like a lesson in reverse psychology. The people that I was supposed to be helping were actually teaching me. They were teaching me things about love and resiliency and living beyond what you think you can live, and not judging somebody from the worst day of their life, and reuniting, and just what it meant to be part of a family, part of a community. And just some very beautiful things happened, both with the volunteers, with the families. I'm still in touch with many people that I worked with in my Get on the Bus days, which now has been over 10 years. I've been here in northern New Jersey working for St. Paul's Community Development Corporation. But whenever you find these gems of people and these different walks of life, sometimes they just come with you. And a lot of the people that I had met out there are now supporting the things that I'm doing in New Jersey. And that to me is just wonderful, right? Because whenever a bunch of people get together around something that's good, something that makes you more whole, something that you feel like you're a larger part of, you just want to continue that conversation. You want to continue that journey on with them. And so I feel very blessed in my life to have gotten a chance to do that. And I think that it was very helpful for my own mental health and very helpful for my own purpose in life. It's why I work in the nonprofit field. It's why I continue to push myself beyond the stretch of imagination in trying to give back to other people. Because like my dad, it's not about the optics. It's about, what I feel in here. And I just feel so much wonderful things in here from doing what I can, merely do out there, trying my best. It really gives back tenfold. So, any organization, just like Angie's organization, please do. It's the right time, especially before the year end or even in the start of the new year. It's time to give to these organizations, because what it is that she's doing and her mission, it's helping other people. And there's just no greater gift. So thank you, Ange, for all that you're doing. I know that you're on the interviewer side, but not to throw you in the interviewee side.
I will say thank you.
It's very important. And I think the people need to hear that message, not only now, don't just give to organizations that you love during November and December. A lot of people do that, and that's wonderful. And you can continue to give during November and December. But don't forget about these places in January. She's still doing great work in January. She's still going to be there for you in March. She's still going to be there for you in July. So please support her, support everything that she's doing, because you're doing wonderful things. Really, really
Thank you.
Things.
Thank you. I will say I was getting ready this morning, and I was thinking about the podcast, and I was thinking about the nonprofit. And, we started the nonprofit first because several of us were all in treatment together, and we saw individuals whose insurance would drop them and they had no transition plans, no way. It was just a disaster. And we said, okay, we cannot sit and watch this happen and not at least do our best to try and make an impact. And hence that part of the nonprofit that we're so much grateful for all funds for, because all of us are 100% volunteer. So, and we're very frugal on everything we possibly can so that we can get enough money to raise money for bridge grants for individuals in these treatment centers. So that's a big part of it. Another part of is so much of sharing stories like this, because it's educating people, breaking the stigma, allowing people to see someone who they may think, oh, this person has everything perfect for them, and suddenly realize, no, they have challenges and struggles. And I'm laughing when the nun said to you, oh, this will be easy. I actually said a little bit to myself, we originally were doing webinars, and it was a struggle to try and meet people up once a quarter for a webinar. And so I was a guest on someone's podcast, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to switch it to a podcast. It'll be easy. Oh my gosh. No, it's not easy. It's not easy. It is unbelievable hard. But what I was thinking about this morning when I was getting ready is it has been one of the hardest things I've done in a long time. And yet I'm so grateful because the number of people and the amazing, and I was thinking about this because I was excited to talk to you and hear your story. And I was just thinking how lucky I am that I have been connected to so many just amazing people that just, it fills my heart. And then I listen to the episodes, and then listeners say, wow, I didn't know I could say no. I didn't know I could do boundaries. I didn't understand this link between this, or I'm so inspired by this person's recovery story or this person's challenge, or, oh my gosh, it took leadership to a new level. It makes me so happy because it's just like making the world a little bit better just by building a community around people, like-minded people like us who really care. So
yes, I love it.
Is there anything that you... Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. There's a really cool quote that I just want to share with people. And, especially whenever you go out there, I mean, everybody has a bad day. I have a bad day too. But I keep this in mind every day whenever I go out there in the world. And that is, your vibe attracts your tribe. Right? So if you go out there and everything, and we all know these people, sometimes we're related to these people and there's not much we can do about it. But if you go out there and you say, oh, everything is horrible, and then this happened, and oh, I can't stand this person, and this person did me wrong, and I'm so upset about this, and this will never get better, and blah, blah, blah. That's who you're going to attract. If you go out there in life and you say, I'm alive. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day. I can get out for 5 minutes and enjoy the nature that's around me. I hear the birds chirping. I see these beautiful, majestic mountains in vision, and I'm going to have a really good day. It's just how you set yourself up. That's who you're going to attract in life. So be that light. There's a guy, and this is like a little off topic, but it's a really good story. There's a guy that walks down, there's a very main street that I kind of live almost off of. It takes me about 2-3 minutes to get there. And this older gentleman, he walks this street every day. I'm not sure really what his destination is. I don't know if he's just walking for exercise or what it is. I think he's supposed to have a cane. So he always carries a cane in his right hand, I guess, just in case he needs it. But guess what he's doing as he's walking down the street? And it's a very busy street with a lot of cars, lots of pedestrians. I thought at first that this man knew every single person in town. But how he spends his day is everybody that drives by him, everybody that walks by him, he acknowledges them and he waves and he smiles.
Oh, I love that.
No matter how bad of a day I'm having, I always hope that I run into this guy because it turns around as soon as I see him. And now I feel like I've never had a personal conversation with him. I know nothing about him. But every time I see him and I spot him from a distance, because you could see him holding his cane in his right hand, I think to myself, he's going to wave at me and he's going to smile at me. And that is just awesome. He doesn't know me, but he's making my day. And guess what? I think he's making other people's day too. So I'm not saying walk
Totally.
down the street with a cane up here, but walk down the street in a way that you are acknowledging everybody that is around you and that you're sending light into the world. Because when you send light into the world, you get light back from the world tenfold. I'm just so
Absolutely.
honored.
Absolutely. And I think it can occur in so many different ways. So one of my modes of transportation now is I have an e-bike, and I have a service dog. So I have an e-bike and I have a sidecar, and my service dog has goggles and she's strapped in, and it is amazing looking. And here's the deal. I bought this just as a cool, because I just wanted to be able to bike to work again, and I needed to have her, and she loves it. She just like hops up into the sidecar, put her goggles on, she's ready to go. But what I did not realize, the unintended gift of it, is that every single person I pass on the way to work and on the way home, everyone smiles.
Yes.
It is just, they look and they immediately smile. You see this look of joy across. I've had more people stop to take a photo of us, you know.
Yes.
And the thing I love about it is that it's just like passing out this gift of happiness to people. And I think the world just needs all of us to remember we have our own unique way to pass out gifts of happiness to other people and to ourselves. And I think much of what you also talked about is starting off your day with a spirit of gratitude. And we've had a lot of episodes where we've talked about, especially in episode 5 on self-care, we talked about gratitude lists. And I have an episode with Mark Kendall, lead guitarist of Great White Band, and he and I talk about gratitude and gratitude lists. And I think that I love seeing it, because when you're talking about it, I can just see the joy and just the passion in your spirit as you're talking about those things. Because when we take a step back and we start our day off, not with the woe is me,
Right.
but with the, okay, here I'm going to maybe just list 5 joys that I have. And it could just be that I'm really grateful I have a flushing toilet today. Like that could be all that it is. And some days that's more important than others. And it could just be that. So we've meandered some. Is there anything you're really hoping we would cover today that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about yet?
No, I could just talk to you forever.
I know. I love this. Okay, well,
we need more episodes.
We do. I was actually thinking that as well. I think I need you to come back for a repeat. So it is a requirement to share your favorite motivational quote. And I'm not sure if you already shared it because you shared one, but do you have another motivational quote that you want to share? If not, you can just restate the one you've already given.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to share a new one.
Love it.
And I'm going to share. So for those of you who may not know, Mr. Rogers is from Pittsburgh. So I always said Mr. Rogers was my neighbor, even though he, believe it or not, was never a customer at the restaurant, which is hard for me to believe because so many celebrities was. He just never was. But one of the things that Mr. Rogers says is, you know, in times of chaos, in times of struggle, whenever the world just seems so not right, you need to look for the helpers. And there are always people that are there that are going to be helping other people. And those are the people that you want to find in a situation. So, you know, if you're struggling with what's going on in the world right now, if you're struggling with what's going on in your personal life right now, if you're struggling with your friends or fitting in or whatever it might be, look for those helpers and define who those people are. And first of all, that's who you want to emulate in life. And second of all, that's who you might need to tap in with to get a little extra love at this particular point in your life. And, you know, there's no shame in that. So that is my quote that I absolutely love and I try to live by every day.
I absolutely love it. Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun. We are absolutely going to have to do it again. It is a deal. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Ange. This was just my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today with your coffee and conversation. We hope you've been encouraged and learned something from today's story. To learn more about today's guest, please check out our show notes for more details. Now it's time to remember to like this episode, subscribe, and turn on your notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. Recovery Advocate Network envisions a world where individuals with mental health challenges receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, all without the stigmas often present in society. We are proud that every individual working with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by making a financial donation via PayPal or Venmo, or email donate@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org if you would like to donate items for our next fundraising auction. Please visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org to learn more. Now, stay in the loop about upcoming events, future episodes, and more by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, LinkedIn, and all major podcast platforms. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. How do you do that? Visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, and in the top right corner, click that comment button and comment. So listeners, what do you need to do? Pause what you're doing, subscribe, follow us. Please give us a like and a 5-star rating, write some meaningful comments, and most importantly, share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose heart you will touch, so please be a part of a reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or if in the U.S., dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the U.S. and need additional resources such as shelter, support group resources, transportation, food, and/or a safe, confidential path out of physical or emotional domestic abuse, please call 211 or visit www.211info.org for assistance. Now, we know you are very busy, and we are grateful that you said yes to sharing time with us today. If you stuck to our 3 C's of engagement and listened to the full episode, then visit the podcast section of our website and leave the comment about the podcast, and you'll be entered to win an autographed copy of one of the books from one of our book club series, as well as a Coffee and Conversation coffee mug. So thanks again. Until next time, back to your coffee.